Welcome back to Twinhammer, everybody. Today we have our Deathwatch Kill Team guide called Defeating Deathwatch. We are going to be going absolutely in depth on everything Deathwatch. We're going to be going through their weaknesses, how they play, their strengths, and their main strategies, as well as all the operatives and combinations. We are going to be covering all changes from the data slate pre-World Championships, and this just got dropped October 29th. The data slate has officially been released, so this will be with all the changes pre-World Championships in mind. We are going to be covering the team in detail. If you know some info already, look for the chapter markings to go directly to what interests you. We're going to be covering everything, so highly suggest going to the chapter that interests you, or if you don't know much at all, join us for the full guide and you're going to learn a lot. Okay, so going into the main team flavor. Deathwatch are basically superhuman soldiers, Space Marines, who are handpicked from other superhuman soldiers. They are the elite of the elite. So they're taken from other chapters as their best warriors, and they're inducted into this separate order of Xenos hunting Space Marines. They are trained and armed to go up against the nastiest Xenos aliens and combat them. They have elite operatives from every style of combat, including sword specialists, shield specialists, speed, disruption, weapon platforms, hammers, and flamers. Okay, so they've got operatives in Gravis armor that can be kind of weapon platforms. The gunner here, they've got Demolisher, who's a hammer specialist, and the head taker, who's a knife specialist. Deathwatch kill teams combat the Xenos foes of the Imperium with adaptive expertise and specialist weaponry. They wield some of humanity's most highly advanced weapons alongside more esoteric equipment. Besides their superhuman strength and speed, the Deathwatch bring to the battlefield their hatred of the Xenos in all its forms. Okay, now we're going to get into the kill team selection. So it is a 5 operative kill team. They do have 11 choices to choose from in terms of operatives. Now, this being said, there's going to be some that are Gravis. We're going to get into that in a moment, and they can only take one of these in a selection of 5. So you're going to choose 5, and then you have kind of every flavor of weapon profile. And the interesting thing about this selection is that they do have one leader operative, the Watch Sergeant, but it is, as you can see, not mandatory to take the leader operative. Since they are considered kind of a team of leaders handpicked from other chapters, they don't really need to automatically bring a leader. They are all leaders in their own rights, even though they don't have the leader keyword, only the Watch Sergeant does. Now, we're going to get into 3 different main types of Marines that we're going to find in this team. We have the Tactica Standard pattern, which is the standard armor. We have 6 operatives that have this armor profile. This is the Watch Sergeant, Blade Master, Aegis, Demolisher, Gunner, and Marksman. Then we have the Phobos pattern, which is kind of the stealthier, faster armor, but lighter, not as tanky. We're going to go with the Head Taker and Disruptor are the 2 operatives with this type of armor. And then we have the Gravis pattern armor. And we have 3 choices we could take there. We have a Bombard, Breacher, and Horde Slayer. And they're all in Gravis armor, which is kind of a tankier, slower style. Now we're going to get into the tactical pattern armor. And this is going to be the Watch Sergeant, Demolisher, Blade Master, Gunner, Marksman, and Aegis. The key thing here is that this is kind of like a standard sergeant profile almost. We have 3 APL, 6-inch move, 3-up save, and 15 wounds. And all of these share the same basic profile. Then we're going to get into the Phobos pattern. We are going to look at the Head Taker and the Disruptor. They have 1-inch more move and 2 fewer wounds. So a little bit faster, but a little less tanky. Then we're going to get into the Gravis pattern, and only 1 choice is allowed in a kill team of 5. Just again, to remind you, we have 3 options. We have the Breacher, the Bombard, and the Horde Slayer. And the key thing here is that they're actually 1 less movement than a standard tactical pattern, but 3 higher wounds. Okay, so I believe probably the reason only 1 choice is allowed because 18 wounds is quite tanky. And those are 3 Gravis choices. Now, we're going to get into another way of grouping the team, and this is grouping by 5 close combat specialists. So there's 5 that are actually geared towards close combat. We've got the Head Taker, who's kind of a knife specialist. a stealthy knife specialist. We've got the Demolisher, who's in-your-face Thunderhammer specialist. We've got the Blade Master, who's a Xenosword specialist. We've got the Aegis, who's got a Maul and Shield, Storm Shield. He's like a Maul and Shield specialist. And the Watch Sergeant with a plasma pistol and a power weapon, who is a power sword specialist. Then we have 6 operative choices that are more geared towards ranged weaponry. And this is the Marksman with a Stalker bolt rifle, the Gunner with a heavy plasma incinerator, the Disruptor with a Marksman bolt carbine. Then the 3 Gravis operatives all have ranged weapons. We have the Infernus heavy bolter for the Horde Slayer, the Breacher has the Hellstorm bolt rifle, and the auxiliary grenade launcher. So he actually has a couple different weapons, and the Bombard has the frag cannon. Okay, and we are going to classify 3 of them as a little bit more of the best 2A operatives. So this is basically a combat weapon plus a upgraded pistol of some sort. So the Head Taker and Blade Master both have special issue bolt pistols, and the Watch Sergeant has a plasma pistol. Okay, so kind of your 3-way specialists in terms of fighting and shooting. Okay, 2-way specialists, I should say. Now, we're going to go into some example combinations. So these are kind of balanced lineups that you could take. So these are 2 distinct balanced lineups. We have one lineup has the Bombard veteran, the Gravis. We have the Disruptor. We have the Watch Sergeant, Marksman, and Aegis. And this other lineup has a completely different set. We have the Breacher, the Demolisher, the Swordmaster. We have the Head Taker and the Marksman. We have the Blade Master, yeah. Okay, now these are example teams. If you really wanted to check heavily into your melee, then we could go into a Watch Sergeant, Head Taker, Demolisher, Blade Master, and Aegis, and then just take maybe the Breacher as a Gravis operative as well. If you wanted to go very shooting focused, you could take the Horde Slayer, Marksman, Gunner, Disruptor, for example. So these are all long-range, powerful shooters, and then you could have 2 two-way operatives that also have decent shooting, which is the Watch Sergeant and Blade Master, as well as kind of giving you some combat as well. All right, now we're going to get into the kill team analysis. So we're going to just quickly talk about how we're analyzing this kill team or kill teams in general. We are going to be using solution-based thinking. So when you look at a kill team's rules on paper, you only really see what they have and not what they don't have. And this is going to be especially prevalent with elite teams whose rules look incredibly good on paper. But solution-based thinking is about finding solutions to problems rather than dwelling on them. So when we see these powerful rules, we're going to actually be thinking of solutions, ways around them, rather than thinking about how powerful they are and dwelling on them. Now, just a fun little example of solution-based thinking versus problem-based thinking. We've got a fun example from Lord of the Rings here. And you could think of that huge army of Mordor that's invading Gondor as an OP kill team. Okay, they've got billions, like not billions, but they've got so many orcs, and they've got Easterlings, and it just looks overwhelming. But Aragorn is thinking, you know what? What's a way around this? We know they're very powerful, but let's think outside the box. Can we find a way to beat them? Do they have any weaknesses? Can we find some hidden tech that will beat them? And so he goes and he thinks of going, he discusses, he finds the army of the dead, and he calls upon them, an obscure undead force in the mountains, and then he comes down with them to defeat them. Before that, though, we had Denethor contemplating on how OP the army of Gondor is. He's chewing on some tomatoes, and he's just mulling over how OP the threat in front of him is. He gets super bummed out. He starts complaining. He starts, just being into his negative thoughts, and we all know what happens after. So I would ask you, when you're thinking of beating a team, are you going to go with an Aragorn-based thinking, or are you going to Denethor it? It's up to you. We are going to try to be taking the Aragorn approach here. Okay, so that being said, let's take a look now. Let's get some weaknesses right out of the way so that it doesn't feel like we're going strengths on strengths. They're a 5 operative team, which inherently means that they are going to have to activate 5 operatives in a row, and you're going to be able to then usually outnumber them. They're going to be really reliant on counteracts. So counteracts we're going to be going into depth on counteracts, but it can be a rule you could play around. They have access to very limited rerolls, yet hit on 3-ups mostly. So for an elite team, they actually don't have a ton of ways of guaranteeing damage going through. They have high damage potential, but they can't guarantee it. Here we see they don't have purity seals like other elite teams do to kind of make sure that they turn misses into hits. They have no combat blades for ranged operatives. So this is a way that other elite teams can kind of mitigate the lack of damage on their melee damage on their ranged operatives. But as we'll see, this team's ranged operatives only have fists. They have a lack of operative redundancy. So because they're so specialized, if you're relying on one particular operative to do a lot of work for you in a matchup, if that operative goes down, the others have very specialized things that might not give you the tools that you need. For example, if you're relying on your gunner to really push through a lot of high damage piercing, if they go down, you might not have access to that high damage piercing shots. They only have 3 APL on each activation, so they are 5 operatives, but they still are limited to 3 APL, just like other 6 operative Marine teams. So they can't cover the board well because of 5 operatives. They can't be everywhere. They're on 32 mil bases or 40 for the Gravis. They can't really be everywhere. So many crit ops rely on controlling objectives in this current pack. So 1/5 of their team has to hold the back objective if they want to be scoring that. So unlike other teams that could do maybe 1/10 of their team or 1/8 of their team is holding that objective, this team actually has to have only 4 operatives going around and doing the other stuff, and one of them is going to be holding. And that's 6 out of 9 crit ops are involving controlling objectives. And they have no way of counting for more than 3 APL for control. Other teams have ways of maybe reducing their opponent's count for control or boosting their own count as counting as 4. Deathwatch still only count as 3 APL despite only being 5 operatives. All right. So let's get into some of their strengths. Simplicity, 5 operatives, each with a ton of capabilities within their own right, means that this team is simpler to play than others. Each operative is kind of their own combo machine in their own right. Flexibility, as we were talking about, 11 different choices, which give you, you do have the tools to go into pretty much every matchup that you need. They are a bit of a stat check team, which means that they have high wounds. They also have damage reduction and heals. They can be quite tough to just punch through in one shot, which if you're playing a team that doesn't quite have a lot of burst damage can be a problem for you. They have very high powered abilities, so they have a ton of abilities that are quite strong, and if you don't know how to play around them, they can feel very, very powerful. But we're going to be going into that in depth. They have high multi-kill potential. Each Deathwatch operative can do a ton of kills just in their own right against a Horde team, for example. They have 1-hit KO potential, so they have a lot of ways of getting clean kills without actually taking any damage back in combat, which is a strength of this team, which that could pair with the high wounds and damage reduction to make them very hard to bring down. They can shrug off stun and poison-based effects with their equipment. They can shrug off injury with a ploy, which can give them a lot of ways of retaining value. They can apply shooting rules when and where needed due to their special issue ammunition. And they are kind of the counteract kings because they have 2 counteract actions they can do, which give them a lot of choice on counteract. Okay, so let's get into the action economy of Deathwatch, how they get the most out of 5 operatives. And this is going to come from a few rules. One, we find in a faction rule, the Veteran Astartes. We're going to be getting into that. It allows them to shoot or fight twice each activation and then counteract twice with 2 separate actions. They shall know no fear is an ignore injury ploy so that they can still function pretty much full capabilities even if they're below half health. Then they have the Scruvatore Servo Thrall, which is equipment that can allow them to do -1 AP actions, mission actions per turn, allowing them to get a little bit better at including mission actions in there. And the Sanctus 5 Bioscryer Cuffs, which is ignore stun and poison, which can allow them to retain their APL efficiency. Okay, how the Deathwatch team works. We have 5 operatives, 3 APL each per activation. Then they kind of would be considered to have 2 APL each on their counteractions because they have 1 AP plus 1 AP, 2 different abilities. So they're essentially, if you would use their counteractions each time, if you got 5 counteractions, they'd almost essentially be maximum 5 APL each operative. So 25 APL, which is really nice. They could change their order on counteraction from conceal to engage or engage to conceal. We're going to be getting into that. That's a ploy. And they can have -1 mission action per turn through the Servo Thrall, which can give one operative almost 6 APL per turn in terms of actions that they're doing, 6 action points. Okay, we're going to be getting into just a quick overview of a core rule from the firefight phase. And when we're performing actions, typically you can't do the same action more than once. It's known as action restrictions per activation. Some rare rules will change the cost of actions regardless of how many AP changes. The minimum is always 0 AP. So this is important to go over because now we're going to see how the Deathwatch can break these. Okay, so their Veteran Astartes, the first part of the Veteran Astartes rule is like kind of the activation portion. It allows them to do 2 fight actions or 2 shoot actions. Now, a stipulation is for the more high-powered guns, if it's 2 shoot actions and you use the auxiliary grenade launcher, frag cannon, heavy plasma incinerator, Infernus heavy bolter, plasma pistol, or stalker bolt rifle, if you use that for both of the shoots, the second shot is going to be a 2 AP worth to do a shoot instead of 1. So 2 APL for second shot. It means that you still shoot with 2 high-powered weapons per turn. It's just they can't really move and do 2 shoots if they're going to do that. And a way of just keeping this, look how long this list is. I had to read it out super quick. A way to keep it in mind is that all Gravis primary weapons are included in this shoot action, like 2 APL shoot action. Also, all plasma weapons are included. So the plasma pistol and the incinerator. And we could think of the Marksman's stalker bolt rifle as well as being included in this. So the Servo Thrall, we've talked about it. Once per turning point during the operative's activation, not counteraction, you can use this rule. If you do during that activation, that operative can perform a mission action for 1 less AP. Having an operative, then we have another thing, having an enemy operative in its control range doesn't prevent that friendly operative from performing a mission action. However, in such an instance, after it does so, you and your opponent roll off. If your opponent wins, you cannot use this equipment for the rest of the battle. So a huge thing to point out here is this can only be used on an activation, not a counteraction. So if they're planning on going in, fighting twice, and then trying to do a mission action for free on a counteraction, they won't be able to. They can only do this during their activation. It allows them to perform most crit op actions for 0 AP. They can operate a hatch for 0 AP during their activation, so something you ought to look out for. They can breach for 1 AP during their activation, also something you have to really look out for on Tomb World. They can, for example, plant a banner for 0 AP. So you got to keep this in mind. Once per turn, they can do a free mission action. If they do it in control range, it doesn't prevent them. So if they fight someone, can't quite kill them, they could still, for example, like loot in their control range, but they might lose this equipment for the rest of the battle if you win the roll off. Just a straight roll off after it. So now we're going to get into counteracts, which is we're going to go over the main rule first, because then we're going to see how they interact with it. So when the Deathwatch player would activate and they've done all their main activations, then they're going to go into what's called counteract. So you can select an expended friendly operative with an engage order to perform a 1 AP action, excluding guard for free. Now, this is a big thing. Guard cannot be done on counteract. Each operative can only counteract once per turning point. That operative cannot move more than 2 inches, must be set up wholly within 2 inches. If it's removed and set up again. Counteracting is optional, so you can choose not to. In either case, activation alternates back to your opponents afterwards. Counteracting isn't an activation. It's instead of activating. This difference is important. For instance, this means that action restrictions won't apply. So one big thing to point out from counteracting is it's not like activation order. They don't have to choose an operative and say, I'm counteracting with this operative and pass with them. They could just pass in general. So it's optional. So they could just wait out your activations as you're going through your remaining activations and just say, okay, in this instance, I'm not counteracting. They're going to maybe wait for you to come in the room or do something like that, and then counteract with the operative. So you can't kind of wait out their activations like you could when they're actually activating. Another big thing is they can't counteract more than once per turning point. So please make sure your opponent is actually your Deathwatch opponent, or you yourself, if you're playing Deathwatch, is putting a marker to show who's counteracted. Otherwise, it could be easy to think that you didn't counteract with so many things to think about during the game. It is like a new series of activations. So they don't have to counteract with everybody, but when they do counteract, you do need to indicate that they have done so. Deathwatch can do 2 separate 1 APL actions, counteract from conceal, and then change their order upon counteracting. And we're going to get into this right now. So This next part of Veteran Astartes is kind of dealing with counteracts. And each friendly Deathwatch operative can counteract regardless of its order. So they could be on conceal and still counteract. So that's breaking the rules of counteract like we saw over there. Whenever it does, it can perform an additional 1 AP action for free during that counteraction, but both actions must be different. So so it's weird wording sometimes in Kill Team. They're like, they can perform a 1 AP action for free. So the action itself can still only be 1 AP. It's just they're not actually spending the action point themselves. They can just do a 1 AP action. Okay, it's weird wording. They can't do an action for free. Let's say it costs 2 APL to do the action. It's still limited to a 1 APA action. 2 APL counteracts, but separate 1 APL actions. It gets around activation limitations. And this combination of being able to do 2 different actions means they can move 2 inches, for example, and then shoot. They can fight 3 times a turn with counteract. So as we were seeing earlier, they could shoot twice with a powerful weapon. Then on counteract, they can shoot with that powerful weapon again because it's not considered their activation, which means the restrictions don't apply. Now, we're going to get into another one of their rules, which is a firefight ploy that involves counteracting. This is called auspicator tracking. All firefight ploys are 1 CP. I've just included it here. They can use a firefight ploy when they're counteracting before it performs any actions. You can change its order. So crucially, this is before it performs any actions. So you can't shoot and then go on conceal afterwards. You have to do the order change before it performs any actions. So it's either a way of from them going to conceal on engage or engage to conceal. So they could flip to engage and then move and shoot, or they can flip to conceal and then move into cover and do a mission action, for example. This means they can shoot you when you're not expecting. They could be on conceal and you're like, oh, they can't shoot me on their counteract. Nope, they can flip and then they can shoot you. Because this is a firefight ploy, we have to keep in mind this is only once per turn. So if they've done this, they can no longer do it again. If they flip to engage and shot you, and there's more of their operatives on conceal and haven't counteracted yet, those operatives can no longer flip. It's not a faction rule, it is a firefight ploy, which means once per turn. They can be untargetable when you're not expecting it. So if they are on engage and you're about to go and shoot them and they're getting into their counteracts, you have to keep in mind that they can just flip to conceal. If they're behind cover, they're going to be no longer targetable. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. And talking about that, we're going to get into what I like to call the counteract window. So countering counteracts, a little play on words. We are going to take a look at their activations, and we have to be very cognizant of when they're going to be going on to counteracts. So we're going to do a little countdown. If you're facing a low operative team like Deathwatch, you have to be aware of when their activations end and when their counteracts begin. If they reach their counteracts, they can fight shoot again, so an expended operative will become a threat once more. It's very important to try to burst down a target before they can counteract if possible. Otherwise, a highly powerful operative can counteract in a very threatening position, possibly. Okay? Now, we're going into the counteract window in action. So, for example, they activate their Breacher, they do a few things, then they activate their Demolisher, do a few things, they activate their Blade Master, they do 3 APL worth of actions, then their Head Taker, and then their Gunner. As you're getting into this last activation, you now have to be very aware because any one of these 5 can now do 2 separate 1 APL actions again. Okay, so now we'd be into counteracts after they've done their main activations. For example, the Gunner can move 2 inches and shoot again with a heavy plasma incinerator. Didn't see that coming. The Demolisher, he could be in combat with an operative that he didn't kill. All of a sudden, he fights again and he kills that operative. And now you had another operative nearby and he shoots with his pistol. Got to be careful for that. The Head Taker can do the exact same thing. He can finish off an operative that he's in combat with a fight action, and then he can shoot again with his counteract separate 1 APL action, and he has a good pistol. The Breacher can breach with the skull and shoot again. Wrong. The reason I've included this is if your opponent is trying this, you have to remind them that breach is a 2 APL action, so they cannot do a 2 APL action on counteract, The Breacher has a Meltamine, which allows him to breach for 1 AP. If he does so, he cannot shoot after breaching. So if they've used their ability to do 1 APL breach, they cannot actually shoot in that same counteraction. Also, they can't do the 1 APL action with the skull for breaching because, as we saw, the skull is actually only in their activation, not in their counteraction. Okay, so I wanted to include this example as something they can't do. But again, this guy could simply move or shoot again or any combination of things. Then, for example, they could do a crit op action like transmit, activate transmission, and then shoot again. For example, the Blade Master can do that as well. So we're going to go into some powerful plays now as examples that can give each Deathwatch operative more than 3 kills a turn, which is going to pair nicely with their tac ops, as we'll see later. So, for example, they could shoot someone, they could shoot an operative, then charge and fight another operative. Then, let's say they're within 2 inches of an additional enemy operative, they could charge 2 inches and fight again. So that's a way they could maybe shoot, kill someone, charge, fight, kill someone, and then charge, fight again, and kill someone again. That's 3 kills. They could shoot, charge. So shoot 2 separate operatives and then charge. And then on their counteract, they could fight, kill that operative, and shoot again. So that's 4 kills potentially. Then they could charge into 2 operatives control range, fight. That's 2 kills potentially. Then charge again 2 inches and fight again. So that we can see is another 3 kills. Or if they want to do some powerful things for mission play, they could do a mission action, charge and fight. That's 1 kill. And then a mission action and shoot. And that's 2 kills, but 2 mission actions in the same turn. So very, very powerful plays they could do within a turn if you are not aware of their counteracts. Now, one thing that we now have to mention is guard, because guard feels like counteracting, but we have to now showcase that guard and counteracting are very different. Guard is going to be simply an action that you can do that's kind of treated like a shooting action that is going to interrupt an opponent's activation. So this is something that can be done on close quarters, but we're pointing out the Marksman because he can actually do it in any kill zone for the Deathwatch. It's a 1 AP action. It's treated as a shoot action. We're going to read the stipulation first because I don't know why they don't do this first, but it's treated as a shoot action. An operative cannot perform this action while it has a conceal order, so can't do it on conceal or while it's in control range of an enemy operative. They cannot guard on counteract. That was stipulated in the counteract rules. If it performs any action, moves, or is set up, it loses its guard. So if it's on guard but then counteracts and does an action, it loses guard. An enemy operative ends an action within its control range and you don't interrupt that activation. So for example, now we're going to get into point blank shot. So actually, before we do that, we're going to get into what guard is. Okay, so going on guard means you can interrupt an enemy operative's activation when they perform an action, and you could perform a fight or shoot action for free, including like a hatchway fight or anything that's considered a fight or shoot action. If you do, that friendly operative cannot counteract during the turning point. Okay, so if they do guard, they cannot then counteract, which is kind of a double-edged sword for Deathwatch because they can do so much on counteract. Do they really want to be guarding instead? One thing to stipulate it here is determine the target as normal for these actions. This means you don't have to target the operative you interrupted. They could go on guard and they have a shooting option, but that shooting option is expended. If you move with another operative, it could be all the way on the other side of the board. They could interrupt after your move and shoot a different target. It doesn't have to be they don't have to shoot or fight the target they're actually interrupting the activation of. Okay. One thing to also stipulate here is guard is neither an activation nor a counteraction. It is simply a shoot fight action that is interrupting an enemy operative after they've performed an action. Okay, and we're going to go back now into other ways that they can guard. They can also do a fight or shoot action. They could do a shoot action in control range, so they don't have to do a fight action if you charge them. They can shoot you. However, you're going to be worsening the hit stat of their weapons by 1. So this is called a point blank shot. And one big stipulation here is an enemy operative, if you charge them and they have their guard, if they don't choose to point blank shoot you in that moment, they actually lose their guard. So this is a big stipulation here. So if they're on guard here, you charge them, they have to either point blank shoot you or fight you. If they don't have the guard anymore. All right. So now we're going to go a little bit more into beating guard. Okay, so guard is kind of a way that they can control an area. So if you move into their guard, they'll be able to shoot you. But we can think of guard is always coming from their head. So if they're trying to shoot you, they always need to draw visibility to your model from their head. So a way of beating it is actually getting visibility to their model, but not allowing them visibility on your model. Because when you're targeting them, you can target any point of their model, their backpack, their toe, their gun, the rules as written. They can only target you from their head. So there's ways of actually you seeing a small part of them, but their head being blocked by something and not seeing you. This is an asymmetric way you can beat guard. Another way of beating their guard is you can place yourself in an obscured position where more than an inch from cover, and you could shoot, and they will only be able to shoot you through obscurity, and you could shoot them without obscurity. So it's kind of an asymmetric obscured shot. And the reason this is good is because Deathwatch can't get anti-obscuring on guard. They have ways of getting anti-obscuring, but it can't be done on guard. So another way of beating their guard is charging them on guard. As we saw, if you charge a shooting operative and they're on guard, they're going to be at -1 to hit you. And then it will get rid of their ability to counteract. So then they're going to be a sitting duck a little bit in combat. So if you respect their guard too much, you're just giving them more value. If you go in, you're going to deny them their counteract. And if you can survive their shooting attack, for example, or a fighting attack on guard, it's a very good option because then they will be a sitting duck. They won't be able to counteract you afterwards. Also, if you charge in, the marksman shoots you, you survive. He can't do the secondary guard that he can do on close quarters because guard cannot be done in close quarters. So he can't double guard if he doesn't kill. Okay? If he kills you with a shot, he can then go on guard afterwards because he'll have no one in control range. But again, if you can risk it, it might be well worth it. Okay, charge a little operative. Let's say you're playing a horde team, charge an operative in that you're willing to throw away. If they guard and kill that operative, you're not too upset. And then you can bring your big guns to bear. They won't have any ability to do anything against you. Let's say if he's in a room isolated by himself. All right, so now we're going to get into a strategy ploy called "And They Show No Fear." This is when they can ignore being injured. So here you subtract 2 inches from their move stat of injured operatives and worsen the hit stat of their weapons by 1. If you're below half of your starting wounds. Okay, so they've actually had this thing of wounded. This only comes up really rarely, but it's fewer than half is injured. So they can move around with no -2 or no -1 to their stats if they are injured, if they play this strategic ploy. Now, if they are stunned, they can, during their activation, get rid of that change to their APL stat. So we have to be careful of this with the Sanctus 5 Bioscryer cuffs. One stipulation is it has to be during their activation and not within control range. So if you've stunned them and they're in control range with you, they cannot do this. But it's during each friendly operative's activation. So they could fall back and then do this because they can do it before or after performs an action. So they could fall back and then get rid of the stun, or fall back and then heal, for example. They just can't do it while in control range of you. They also have two other options. They have regain up to D3 lost wounds, or remove one of the following tokens: neutron, fragment, poison, or terror chem. So previously, I was thinking that they could just remove any debuff, but it actually, you can think of it as like a medical cuff, a little medikit. They can't shrug off anything that's not like radiation from neutron fragments or poison. Okay, so radiation and poison they can shrug off, but not like blaze from sanctifiers, for example, or novitiates, or any other debuffs. that you put on them, they can't just shrug those off. Now, there's something to look at here. There is a stun window if you're trying to lower their ability to count for objectives to 2 APL. If they are on their counteractions, like if they've already activated, you could then throw a stun grenade on them. It'll be -1 APL. They can't remove it until they activate again. So there is a window to stun them where they would count as 2 APL. So you can think of that there too. Now, we're going to go into their defensive buffs. So one of the big strengths with Deathwatch is they actually do have raw high wounds plus defensive buffs. So the 4 defensive buffs they have are a strategic ploy called the Long Vigil. If they're within their own territory, they can reroll one of their defense dice. So they have some protection from shooting in their own territory. This is the big one, the Shield That Slays. If they're in your territory at all, just within, they can reduce normal and critical damage of 4 or more by 1. So they'll reduce it by 1. So if you have a 4/4 damage profile, it's going to go to 3/3. We're going to see that in a second. They can have more defense against shooting. They could block a crit with a normal in shooting through transhuman physiology. So if you've rolled a crit in 3 hits against them, they can spend a CP and just retain one of their normal successes as a crit instead. Also, they have the Sanctus V Bioscar Cuffs. Again, they can regain some wounds on their activation. Now we're going to go into the very big thing for them that they're going to probably be playing almost every turn. It's the Shield That Slays. So if they are here in the map, let's say your team is in this gray zone, if they've now come into your half, you're basically all your weapons that do 4 or more damage are going to be doing 1 less. So you could just think of it as Deathwatch get tankier when they're within your half. Damage of 3 or less is unaffected. If your damage profile is 3/3, unaffected. If it's 2/3, unaffected. It's just the stronger stuff that they have some defense against. Now, let's go really quickly into some examples. Okay, so since it doesn't specify shooting or combat, it means that it's in both shooting and combat. So we can see if you have a power weapon, that's going to go down from a 4/6 profile to a 3/5 profile against them. If you have a bolt gun 3/4, your crits now do 3 damage instead of 4 damage. If you have an Astartes shotgun, like the Scouts, your 4/4 shotgun profile is going to go to a 3/3 shotgun profile. If you're throwing a crack grenade from Universal Equipment against them, your 4/5 crack grenade is now going to do 3/4 crack grenade instead. You could think of it almost like they have like 20 wounds in your half instead of 15. But don't get too anxious about this, because if you employ some of the strategies we talk about, if you shoot them with enough, they will still go down. It is hard though. Like, this is quite tanky. So you have to keep this in mind, because you could have your normal breakpoints in mind. You'll be like, oh, they only have 4 wounds left. I'll charge them, just hit them with a 4 damage normal. Actually, no, they'd be alive on 1 wound, because now your 4/6 power weapon went to a 3/5 power weapon. Or they could have 6 wounds left. You're like, oh, I'll finish them off with a crit. Actually, no, that crit now does 5 damage. So they'll be alive on 1 wound. So we do really have to take into account these changed damage profiles when you're going in against them in your half. Okay, so now their shooting defense, we see that they can reroll only in their half. They have this up, but anywhere they can retain 1 normal as a critical success in shooting. Okay, these are both ploys, but they do have some shooting defense. Okay, one little thing to look at here is that both the Shield That Slays and the Long Vigil say within, not wholly within. So if they are straddling, if their base is on the halfway line and they're within their own half and your half, they get the Shield That Slays plus the Long Vigil. Because of the wording within and not wholly within, they can get both buffs on the halfway line. So that is something to keep in mind. Now we're going to get into the Deathwatch offensive shooting buffs. So this is only involving shooting and offensive shooting. So they have a faction rule called Special Issue Ammunition, which allows them to give, once per turning point when they're performing the shoot action, they can, in the select weapon step, they can use this rule. So this is a key thing to point out here, is that it's in the select weapon step. So they can't add this in after they've rolled their dice to shoot. Okay, so they can't get like a 5 on their dice and be like, okay, now I'll do lethal 5 to make those a crit. It has to be done in their select weapon step. Okay, so they're going to have to do this in advance, trying to give themselves these rules before they roll. And one stipulation is it can't be used with explosive grenades or melta bombs. Okay. Now we're going to go into their other ones. They have mission tactics. which gives them limited balance rolls on their shooting. They have Suffer Not Their Aliens, so against Xenos, they have Relentless. They have powerful shooting rules. So ammunition reserve, they could use this special ammunition twice per turn. Advanced Auspex Scan, they can ignore obscuring once per turn. And then they have access to the ammo cache, which is going to be good with them. Now we're going to go into all of these in detail. Okay, so our special issue ammunition. One big thing is it can be used on counteracts because it's a shoot action. It can be used with guard because it's simply a shoot action and guard counts as a shoot action. It can't be used with grenades, as we saw here. A few things it doesn't give is it doesn't give Seek Light, it doesn't give Balanced, and it doesn't give Anti-Obscuring. What they do have from special issue ammunition is Blast 1 inch, which can't be used if you already have the Torrent rule. Devastating 1, which will do 1 damage on a crit. Lethal 5, which can retain 5s as crits, not just 6. Piercing 1. Rending. So if you retain a crit, you can turn one of your normals to a crit. Saturate, you can remove a cover save, if any, from your opponents. And then Severe, if you don't retain any crits, you can turn 1 normal into a crit. Okay, and then as we saw, they do have an equipment that they can take, which can make them use this once per battle. They can do 2 instances of this per 1 turning point. But a stipulation is they have to select different weapon rules for both uses. So they can't do, let's say, Rending twice that turn. They could do 1 instance of Rending, 1 instance of Blast 1, or 1 instance of Rending, 1 instance of Lethal 5, for example. Okay, so they have to have different weapon rules. So they could use the same weapons. This should actually say different weapon rules. So they could use, for example, their plasma gun for both of these, but they can't give the same weapon rule to the plasma gun. Okay, so mission tactics is another one they have. They get balanced against enemy operatives that either have conceal or engage. Okay, so this is kind of limiting because a lot of times their enemy, whoever's facing Deathwatch, is going to have a mix of operatives on conceal or engage. Sometimes if it's deep into a turn, you'll have a lot on engage and you'll get a bit more out of this, but it's a little bit limited. So they almost have like half balanced. They have a reroll half the time almost. And one thing is they have no way of switching this ploy halfway through the turn. So Angels of Death and other elite teams, they actually have ways of switching their tactics, their rerolls through the turn, through like their sergeant or other ways. It's like they have to choose at the start of the strategic phase. If they choose wrong, they could just be at a lack of rerolls. Suffer Not the Alien, again, they have Relentless against all alien species, but not against any of the Chaos or Imperium. So it's weird that they wouldn't hate Chaos, but I guess they're so consumed about the Xenos that they don't really hate the Chaos as much. But again, Imperium would be their allies, so they're just like a little less willing to do damage against Imperium forces. Again, they're trained. You could think of it as they're just trained against the Xenos, so they don't really have the extra tools to go up against anyone else. So really quick breakdown of Xenos teams. These are all the Xenos teams listed here. So we have the Tyranid subgroup, so Raveners, Wormblade, Brood Brothers. We have the Necron subgroup, Canoptic Circle, Hierotech Circle. The Orc subgroup, Commandos, Rekka Crew. The Tau subgroup, Vespids, Farstalkers, Pathfinders, and upcoming Darkstar, which are the stealth suits. We have the Aldari Jukari, the Blades of Cain, Corsairs, Hand of the Archon, Mandrakes, and Void Dancer troop teams. So all the type of elf teams. And then the dwarf teams, the Votan. We have Salvagers and Jaegers. Okay, so these are all of the Xenos teams. None of these teams have the Chaos or Imperium keyword. Now we're going to get into the Firefight ploy, the Advanced Auspex Scan. This is their anti-obscuring rule. It's a firefight ploy. So it lasts the full activation or counteraction. So they could pop this and get 2 shots anti-obscuring in their activation. Or if it's their counteraction, they could use it for 1 shooting ability there. Now, let's just specify that it's only once per turn. So they only get anti-obscuring once per turn. And it's only per activation or counteraction. It doesn't last from the activation into their counteraction. So it doesn't last until they're next activated. It doesn't last the full turning point. It's only maximum for 2 shooting actions. So you can actually use obscuring against this team if you're trying to do it a lot, because they actually can only do it once. Now, one big thing to specify is guard is neither a counteraction or an activation. So they can't use this with guard. They can't guard shoot you and get anti-obscuring. They also get the saturate rule. So really good that on teams that rely on cover and retain double, like Raveners. Raveners can retain 2 for cover, which makes them a lot tankier. You can get saturate and just ignore this. You also have special issue ammunition, which gives you saturate. Nemclaw and Wormblade rely on obscuring with their rules, so this is good against those teams. Any teams that relies on obscuring. If you're the Deathwatch player, this is what you're looking for using this for. It has really good synergy with smoke grenades because they could pop a smoke grenade down as their first action, then shoot twice using this Auspex scan out, so they could shoot out of the smoke. So typically, if you're shooting outside of smoke and you're in smoke, you are going to be obscured at who you're shooting, but this can kind of get around that. Oh, this smoke grenade rule has been updated. This is the old smoke grenade rule, by the way, because of the piercing changes. Just keep that in mind. This smoke grenade, I've just included it to include the obscured part, not the piercing part. Okay, so now we're going to get into an equipment that works really well with them, because the ammo cache, unlike that Auspex scan, it does last until the next turning point. Whenever it's shooting from a weapon from its data card, you can re-roll your attack dice. So this is really good synergy with this team because they can do it for 3 different shoot actions. They can get re-rolls. So they can shoot twice on their activation, then shoot again on their counteract. And this will apply to each of them. Also, if they get a blast 1 or torrent 1 off, they're getting this re-roll each of those times as well. So it can be very, very good with them. It gives them much needed re-rolls. One stipulation, it's only weapons on their data card, so they can't use it with cracks or frags. Not that they would really want to. The only stipulation that's hard with the ammo cache is they have to go right to the ammo cache and take this. But it's 0 AP, so it could just give them a lot of rerolls if needed. So just watch out if you're playing Deathwatch and they're near an ammo cache. That operative is going to their consistency is going to be raised a lot if they're shooting you. We're going to now get into Deathwatch offensive fighting buffs. So they have digital weapons. When they are fighting, they can inflict 1 damage before, at the start of the roll attack dice step, they can inflict 1 damage. This will allow them to get 1-hit KOs, which is going to be very, very important. They have mission tactics, so they get balanced if they're fighting against that particular concealer engage. And then they have relentless if they are fighting against any Xenos. They can get reroll all of theirs. They have command reroll as well. The big thing with this is all 3 of them don't mention retaliating. No faction rerolls on retaliation and no digital weapons on retaliation. So all of their buffs in combat come from fighting. They have no rerolls, no digital weapons on retaliation. The only way to get a reroll for them on retaliation is a command reroll, which is a universal ploy. Now, we are getting into the Deathwatch profiles. Because the operatives are all specialists in their own right, each operative must be thought of as having specific strengths or weaknesses in their own right. Now, we're going to be getting into the Watch Sergeant. And this is widely considered to be a very valuable option because of his 2 rules, adaptable armory. You can select 1 additional equipment option, so it could give you an extra equipment like an ammo cache, for example, which can be very valuable, and strategic command. You can do each of the following once per battle. You can, if this operative is in the kill zone, so not when he dies, use a Deathwatch strategy ploy for 0 CP. I use a Deathwatch firefight ploy for 0 CP. So can give you 2 CP essentially. One big thing to point out is that command reroll is not a Deathwatch ploy, it's universal. So if they're using a command reroll for free, they have mistaken this. It has to be a specific Deathwatch ploy. And as we saw earlier, he's a good 2-way operative. You can charge fight shoot with him very nicely with a power weapon and a plasma pistol. Can 1-hit KO 7 wound operatives. So because you can do 6 damage with a crit, you could do digital weapons to do 1 damage per 1 damage and then go in there. And digital weapons is only once per turn, so got to keep that in mind. Powerful shooting attack from the plasma pistol into armored operatives. Can shoot on counteract again with that plasma pistol. Now, let's get into some weaknesses. Only 8-inch plasma pistol. So as we saw, they can't cover the board too well. So that 8-inch, especially when you're relying on counteracts, could be a little bit of a disadvantage. Your opponent could know like, oh, he only has 8 inches on that counteract, or maybe a 2-inch move plus a counteract. So I'll just be outside of 10 inches and shoot them. Also, if you're trying to shoot twice with the Watch Sergeant, you can't because he has no bolt pistol. He only has the plasma pistol. So It's going to cost him 3 APL to shoot twice. As we saw earlier, lack of retaliation rerolls and limited fighting rerolls. So even though he's a close combat specialist, he has limited access to rerolls. Now we're going to get into the Deathwatch Aegis veteran. This is the big guy with the shield. He has 2 important rules. His Storm Shield gives him basically the ability, when this operative is fighting or retaliating with this weapon, each of your blocks can be allocated to block 2 unresolved successes. So he could take 1 normal and parry 2 normals, could take a crit and parry a normal and a crit, or 2 crits, so some defensive buffs in combat there. And the Storm Shield, whenever an operative is shooting this operative, worsen the X of the piercing rule by 1, if any. Note that piercing 1 would therefore be ignored. So quite tanky against shooting. And one big thing with the Aegis veteran here to point out is that he has a 2+ save, not a 3+. So he has the standard tactical armor, but he actually does have a 2+ save thanks to the shield giving him extra save. Okay, and then he can 1-hit KO because he has like a 4/6 on his maul. So he could use digital weapons, and yeah, he can fight twice. Everyone can fight twice. One big weakness to point out is that unlike other operatives that have shields, for example, namely subductors on exaction, they go first and then they can double parry. This guy hasn't quite mastered the art of the maul and shield like the subductors have. He doesn't go first. He can double parry, but he does not go first. So can be weak to like a stealth assault, for example, from like a Phobos or anyone, maybe Void Dancers going in murderous entrance. He can't parry them before they can do that, so they can do their double damage to him right away before he can actually parry. Then if you have any operatives that can pre-parry, you can, because he has a lack of retaliation rerolls, limited fighting rerolls, he is weak to operatives that can pre-parry. For example, the Kurnathi on Corsairs can go in, pre-parry one of his things, and then parry another. Let's say he only rolls 2 hits. All of a sudden, the things he was going to double block you with have just been already parried out. And again, ways of kind of getting around him in combat. Will go down to crits and damage from shooting despite a high save. So even though he might be better against melta pistols, if you have like rending and if you have lethal 5, outside of the transhuman physiology, will go down to crits because all of his saves can only be used to block 1 crit. Okay, so also devastating is very good against the Aegis because you're doing mortal wounds outside of him even rolling to save. So if you have access to devastating against this operative will go down. Devastating is also good against the shield that slays damage reduction in general. So if you have access to devastating, the Deathwatch are going to be scared because you're going to bypass all of their defensive buffs. Let's go into the Blade Master veteran. This operative has some very important roles. It's one of the most potentially powerful operatives on the team. And the reason is because he's wielding this Necron blade that has crazy technology on it. And it has 2 different abilities. He also, pointing out, has a special issue bolt pistol. So he's one of the few operatives who actually have piercing 1 on their bolt pistol. He has 2 important rules. He has adaptive swordsmanship. You can ignore any changes to the hit stat of this operative's Xenophase blade. When this operative is fighting or retaliating, you can resolve one of your successes before the normal order. If you do, that success must be used to block. So this Blade Master veteran has ways of kind of mitigating any damage back to him in combat. If he's being offensive, he can like parry. Let's say he's going into someone, they have 1 hit. He can just parry that hit out of the way and then just do all the rest of the damage. Also, to note, he has 5 attacks with brutal and lethal 5. So if he's doing single target, he has brutal and lethal 5. He can 1-hit KO 7 wound operatives. He's a good 2-way operative, charge, fight, shoot. Again, lack of retaliation rerolls, limited fighting rerolls, only 8 in shooting range. But now we're going to go into his biggest strength. It is the phase sweep from the Xenophase blade. Whenever this operative performs the fight action with this weapon profile, if it is incapacitated, it can perform a free fight action afterwards, but you must select this weapon profile, which it has to be the phase sweep profile, not the duel. It can fight against each enemy operative within its control range once per activation or counteraction using this weapon profile. This takes precedence over action restrictions, and you can continue to perform free fight actions until it's incapacitated or has fought against every enemy operative in its control range. Okay, the golden thing that this would be is like charge, get into the close combat range of like 8 Pathfinder models that suck in combat and just fight for free against all 8 of them and kill them all. So that's the biggest potential with Phase Sweep. We're going to see now a crazy play from Phase Sweep. Let's say he's facing Chaos Cults. He's charged into a group of 3 Chaos Cults. He's managed to get in control range of all 3 of them. Phase sweeps each of them, uses adaptive swordsmanship to parry out any hits they have, then straight up kills all 3 of them. Now, kills all 3 before he even counteracts. So he kills all 3. Now he's not in control range. He sees another 2 that are on engage within 1 inch, uses his special issue bolt pistol, gives it a blast 1, shoots both of these with piercing and blast. Let's say it's on close quarters, lethal 5, piercing 1, kills both of these. That's already 5 operatives he's killed in 1 activation, okay, because the phase sweep was 1 action to kill all 3 of these. So he had an extra APL to do this special. Then he's used 1 shoot action to kill 2. So 1 fight action to kill 3, 1 shoot action to kill 2, that's 5. Then on his counteract, he charges into close combat range to another 2, and then he's used the phase sweep again in his counteract and fought both of these and killed both of them. So this is like a crazy example of, if it comes off, this operative can kill in 1 turn. That's 7 operatives killed by 1 operative of yours. So crazy. It would take the stars to align for this to happen. But again, this is the potential the Blade Master has, especially against hordes. Now, let's say you're a horde and you're like, oh man, that sounds insane. Now I'm like really shaking I'm shaking, like how the hell they're going to wipe out half my team in one activation, 1 turn, not 1 activation, but 1 turn. Let's just look at ways we can avoid this happening. Base size of a 32 millimeter base is 1.26 inches. Control range is 1 inch either side. You want to try to space out your operatives 3.5 inches apart. You're going to not be able to be double charged and phase swept by this operative. Okay, so that's a way you can avoid that previous nightmare scenario for you happening. The Deathwatch, if they get it off, will be really, really happy. They're going to be like, Kill Team's my favorite game ever. You're going to be like, what just happened? So if you want to avoid that, 3 apart. Okay, now we are going to be going into the Demolisher Veteran, which is the big guy. Okay, he's on the Deathwatch team. By the looks of it, he's also on the Sasquatch team. Now, this heavy Thunderhammer that he has a bolt pistol, just a normal bolt pistol. But this heavy Thunderhammer is going to be 5 attacks, 4 up, 6, 7, shock, and stun. Okay, so usually in combat, you just have shock. He has shock and stun. So if he retains any crit at all, whoever he's fighting is immediately -1 APL. That's in retaliation or fighting. He also has a rule called Brutal Assault. When he is fighting, the Thunderhammer has Brutal. When he performs a charge and then fight, he has Brutal and Ceaseless. So Ceaseless, any results of 1 result on the dice, he can re-roll. And that's his whole activation or counteraction. So if he charges into 2, he gets Ceaseless against both of his targets. He also has super damage reduction, so he has aggressive force. Whenever this operative is fighting or retaliating, normal or critical damage of 3 or more inflicts 1 less damage on it. This is cumulative with the shield that slays. So it was stacking before, so he would get crazy amount of damage reduction. Now they've just, in the data slate, this was the one change they made to this team. His aggressive force damage reduction is not cumulative with the shield that slays. So the important thing is here, he doesn't have to be in the opponent's territory to get this. It's everywhere. And if you're shooting him with a 3-4 profile, that now goes down to 2-3. So really good damage reduction, but he's on a 3-up slave like normal. The heavy Thunderhammer here can 1-hit KO 8 wound operatives. So now we're getting into the bigger human profiles or elf profiles. This guy can one-shot them with digital weapons. One thing to point out though is, because it's, again, he's getting Ceaseless on the charge and he's going on fighting. He's a really good offensive operative, but the only thing he has in defense is really like the tankiness through aggressive force. He can go down really quickly. If you actually charge him, he's 5 dice on 4s. So it means he might actually just get 2 hits against you. If you have a pre-parry ability or a parry twice ability, you just parry those both out of the way, and then even with all his damage, you're just like heaping bunch of dice onto him in combat. It's getting reduced, but he's just a sitting duck for your attacks. So even when he's charging on 4s, ceaseless on 4s, he can still whiff. So this Demolisher is going to rely a lot on this aggressive force to just be tanky enough to kind of mitigate his whiffs, because on a 4-up, it's a 50% chance he's going to hit, which is very low if you're looking for reliability. Now we're going to get into the Head Taker Veteran. Again, this is a Phobos profile, 7-inch move, 13 wounds. He is, again, a good 2-way operative with a piercing 1, special issue combat pistol, and he has the knives, which are 4-5, 5 attacks on 3s. So big rules from this operative. He's kind of like a super Reaver, or like a Reaver Sergeant, you can think of him. He has the Grav Shoot and Grapnel Launcher, so when he's climbing, he only treats the vertical distance as 2 inches. This operative is dropping, ignore the vertical distance. So really good at getting up to like the second floor Volcus, because he only has to go 2 inches. And then for you to charge him, it's going to be impossible. But for him to charge you, he just drops for free. So really good on Volcus asymmetric charge potential. And then he has the Clandestine Head Taker. This operative can perform the charge action while it has a conceal order. Whenever this operative is fighting against an operative that it was invisible to at the start of the activation counteraction, the first time you strike during that sequence, you can immediately resolve another one of your successes as a strike before your opponent. So he has kind of the lethal assault from Phobos built in to his profile, so he doesn't even have to spend a CP on it. Really, really good there. So he can one-hit KO 10 wound operatives. Actually, he can one-hit KO 11 wound operatives, I should have put, because with Digital Laser, he can actually do 1 damage before, and then if he has 2 crits, you could just resolve 2 crits in a row. 10 and 11 wound operatives are at risk from just getting 1 shot killed from this guy. Really, really good. Even against other elites, you're doing quite a bit of damage. 11, if you do 11 wounds before you do anything, he could take out another Deathwatch in 2 hits if he's charging them in their half, for example. So even good against elites, and it could charge from conceal order as well. So he can do this all on conceal, all of his charging. He can actually, one thing to think about is he can do the Head Taker action again on counteraction, because you could charge with 1 AP for 2 inches and then again do this Head Taker action if it's charging against another operative it was invisible to. Okay, so like we talked about with Guard, if this guy somehow is not visible to the enemy operative, then he can get this Clandestine Head Taker again on a counteract. So something to keep in mind. Really good 2-way operative, charge, fight, shoot. That's if he's not charging from conceal, because he couldn't shoot from conceal. 7-inch move, again, allows him some really good charge distance. He's going to have a 10-inch threat range on his charges, which is quite nice. Again, weaknesses here is lack of retaliation rerolls, only 8-inch shooting range, limited fighting rerolls, only 13 wounds. So again, liable to whiff, despite all his high damage potential, could whiff as well. Only 13 wounds, won't be as tanky as other Deathwatch. Now let's get into the first of our Gravis profiles we're looking at, the Bombard. This guy's got a big frag cannon. He's got bolt pistol as well. So if you're wanting to shoot twice, he can kind of move, shoot with the frag cannon, then shoot with the bolt pistol if you need to move. So really nice there. In combat, only has 3-4 fists, 4 attacks. No way of upgrading that. So it's kind of like a hyped, we could think of the frag cannon as a hyped up grenade launcher. It's very powerful shooting. It can go 5-7 piercing 1, and keep in mind we can add in this special issue ammunition onto this. So we could do lethal 5-7 piercing 1. We could do rending 5-7 piercing 1. It can be quite scary. And then the shrapnel is torrent 2. So you can add on some rules to the torrent 2, like rending. And if you're shooting on close quarters, you're going to have 5 attacks, 3 ups, 4-5, rending, lethal 5, which can be very good, especially against like a Geomancer, which the torrent will shut off their get down Mr. President ploy. Then you're gonna have lethal 5 and rending. You could also, I think, give piercing to this torrent 2. So you could have torrent 2, lethal 5 from close quarters because of torrent, then piercing. That's really good. Really, really good. Again, because he's Gravis, he's 18 wounds, he's extremely tanky. Not heavy, so a lot of these feel like they should be heavy, but they're not. Because of the Gravis armor, it's meant to carry the weight a bit. So even though these weapons look like they would be a heavy rule on them that would prevent them from doing it, from a normal reposition, they could reposition the full 5 and shoot, or they can move dash and shoot with the frag cannon. So keep in mind, they can actually reach pretty far. If you're unawares, they could move dash and then move dash 8 and then shoot you with a torrent 2. So keep that in mind, the threat there. Let's go to the weaknesses. Weak in combat, only 4 attacks with 3 ups on 3/4. In combat is a good way. You could just do heaps of damage, heap on a lot of damage, and bring down this 18 wounds. Won't feel like a lot if you could just do a bunch of straight damage in combat. Lack of retaliation rerolls. They have limited fighting rerolls, as we saw. 40mm base can be hard to position. You can set up some razor wire. It'll be impossible for them to get around it sometimes, which would bring their 5-inch move down to like 3 inches. So you can zone this guy out a little bit. And then 3 APL to shoot twice in the same activation with the frag cannon. So if he does want to shoot the frag cannon twice, it's going to cost a full 3 APL to do that. Let's go into some more Gravis. The Breacher Veteran, widely considered to be very good. And the reason that is because he actually has 3 different weapons that he comes with at all times. He doesn't have to choose them. He comes with all 3. And the 3 he has are an auxiliary grenade launcher. So just kind of a regular grenade launcher, 2-4 frag profile, 4-5 piercing, 1 crack profile. He has the Hellstorm bolt rifle, which is torrent 1-4-5, so quite nice still. And then he has a melt-a-bomb, so you can't see in any of the pictures typically, but he's got a melt-a-bomb strapped to his rear end behind him. And this is a devastating, it's a 5-6 essentially, but 5-3 devastating 3. Piercing 2, limited 1, which means you only can shoot this once per game. It's heavy reposition only, so can only do it after repositioning 5 inches. So can't move, dash, and throw the grenade. And then in combat, just has fists. Again, the reason the Breacher's so good is because the auxiliary is going to take, the auxiliary grenade launcher is going to take an additional APL to fire twice. But the Hellstorm bolt rifle, which is a 4-5 torrent 1, can be shot twice in a turn. So he can move and shoot twice with the Hellstorm. A lot of variety in the shooting here from the Breacher. Can breach an access point for 1 less due to the melt-a-bomb being piercing 2. And very tanky again because of the Gravis. Not heavy. Again, none of the things are heavy except for the melt-a-bomb. And again, weaknesses, 5-inch movement, weak in combat, 40mm base. And then it's going to cost them 3 PL to fire the grenade launcher twice. Okay, we're going to get into the Horde Slayer Veteran. This veteran has basically a Infernus Heavy Bolter, which is kind of like a 2-in-1 weapon. He's got a Flamer and a Bolter on the same weapon. He's just like, why take 2 different weapons when I can make 1 into 2? So he basically has a big Flamer, which has 8-inch range, saturate, torrent 2, 5 attacks, 3/3 on 2s. The big thing with this is a 5-attack Flamer on 2-ups. So the chances of you getting like all 5 hits, even if your opponent does roll a few, you're going to get all that. Again, we could add piercing 1 to this, I believe, through the ammunition. So that's going to be very, very powerful because you get lethal 5 on close quarters too. Can be very powerful. Infernus Heavy Bolter, I think as long as you don't have the blast. Infernus Heavy Bolter, if he uses the Bolter profile, he's 4-5 piercing crits 1. You could get severe and just trigger the piercing crits, which is something you could do with the ammunition, or lethal 5 give you extra chance. Again, here piercing crits 1, torrent 1. With that profile again. So he does have access to torrent from a long range shot. Give him lethal 5 on Into the Dark. Get piercing, make that rending. All of a sudden, he's shooting really, really well. Very powerful here as well. So all 3 Gravis operatives, as we can see, very, very powerful shooting, but extremely weak in melee. Only 4 attacks, 3 ups, 3/4. Considering you're only a 5-man team, they do have that weakness in melee there. Let's get into the Deathwatch Marksman now. So we're outside of the Gravis profiles, back into a tactical profile. This operative is a good shooting profile. It has a Stalker bolt rifle, which has a mobile profile, kind of just like a regular bolt rifle if he's moving. But if he's staying relatively still, heavy dash, he gets 4 attacks, 2 ups, 3/5, lethal 5, piercing crits. And again, can be added with special ammunition to be rending, which can be really, really good. And he has fists in close combat. The big thing with this guy is he can guard on any kill zone, not just in close quarters. And if he is in close quarters, he actually can guard twice. So he can shoot on guard and then immediately perform another guard. So let's say You walk into the room, he guards, then he goes on guard again, then you shoot him, he survives, then he guard shoots you again. So can be quite powerful there. We've already seen guard a little bit, so he has ways to get around that. If he's on guard as well, he's hitting you on 2s. So can push through all 4 attacks quite easily and make you roll with only 2. So he can be quite powerful. So again, if you're trying to guard him shooting you in close combat, he's going to be on 3s to the point blank. Still pretty good though. But again, if you're on guard, he won't be able to do any anti-obscuring on guard. Okay, again, really weak in combat. And we're going to go into the Gunner Veteran, which has the Heavy Plasma Incinerator. And this Heavy Plasma Incinerator is going to be 5 attacks, 3 ups, 4, 6, piercing 1. So 5 attack plasma gun, which is pretty much bringing it into one of the best guns in the game. And if you go hot with it, you get lethal 5 and piercing 1. So really, really good. With the 5 attacks, almost makes it pseudo piercing 2 because you're like, you can, if you roll all your attacks, going to be pushing through a lot because your opponent only ever has 3 defense dice and they'll only have 2 with piercing 1 maximum. Then the fists are going to be 4 attacks, 3 and 3, 4. So massive damage potential. We can see you can get up to 30 damage in one shot if everything goes right. 25 if you're all normals. Like 30 damage if you get all crits on lethal 5s if you somehow get a golden roll and just get like all 5s and 6s. Really, really good. And keep in mind, this can be shot 3 times a turn. So really does have the damage output. That being said, limited access to rerolls. So this could look like a really good profile, but then you roll a bunch of 1s and 2s and whiff, your opponent makes 2 saves, all of a sudden you just do like 5 damage to them, and that's going to be a bit of a bummer for you. Can shoot twice after moving because he does have a bolt pistol as well, which is nice. But if you give this guy 2 shots when he's standing still and then another counteract, you can pretty much expect to be melted by this plasma, and again, can add the special issue ammunition rules to this already very dangerous profile, making it even better. You could get lethal 5 and rending. It can be very, very good. Deathwatch Disruptor Veteran. He is going to be the main kind of disruption tech piece that this team has. He's of the Phobos profile, 7-inch, 13. He's got the Marksman Bolt Carbine, lethal 5, 3, 4. Which again can be paired with rending. Advanced Omni Scrambler. It's a strategic gambit, so you're going to have to do this in the strategy phase. You're going to select one enemy operative visible to or within 6 inches of this operative, roll 1d6. In the following firefight phase, the enemy operative cannot be activated or perform actions until one of the following is true. Your opponent has activated a number of enemy operatives equal to the result of d6. It's the last enemy operative to be activated. So, or perform actions. So you could roll 6 and then they would have to activate 6 enemy operatives equal to the d6, or if it's the last enemy operative to be activated. Okay, I guess if they're already on counteracts, it wouldn't block counteracts because it's only activated it's looking at. Okay, so then he gives you the ability to get 0 CP if you're using the Firefight ploy to ignore obscuring and get saturate. If he isn't within control range of enemy operatives, and if the target of the shoot action is visible to him, he doesn't have to be the one performing the shoot action. So if someone's using the Auspex triangulation ploy and he can see the target they're shooting, they can use that ploy for 0 CP. Again, it's only once per turning point though, because it is a Firefight ploy. He doesn't get around that. If you use it every single turn, you could probably save up to 4 CP potentially. He can delay an immediate threat, allowing you to deal with them. Very strong against elites because they would have to cycle through maybe their entire team before they can activate that operative. He can shoot twice as usual. He can stack lethal 5 with rending, which is nice. Relies on being closer, needing visibility. So sometimes it can be hard to get visibility with Tomb World and Volcus. Volcus, the walls are so high. And then Tomb World, there's walls everywhere. So that are also high. So can be actually quite hard to get visibility sometimes. Now let's get into the Deathwatch scoring. So now we're finally out of the profiles, the 11 profiles of Deathwatch, and we're into their 2 archetypes, which is Seek and Destroy and Security. And so their main strategies they're going to be revolving around are Dominate, Rout, and Plant Banner. And so Dominate is basically they're going to be tallying up their kills, and each time a friendly operative incapacitates an enemy operative, it gains one of your Dominate tokens. At the end of the 3rd and 4th turning point, you can move Dominate tokens from friendly operatives that aren't incapacitated, you cannot score more than 3 VP from this per turning point. So they're going to be trying to tally up kills on each of their operatives and then bank those kills at the end of the 3rd or 4th turning points for points. Very good synergy into non-elite teams because this team has a lot of damage potential like we saw, and they're quite tanky to survive. So they're going to be dominating against non-elite teams most of the time. The reason they won't use dominate against elite teams maybe is because they can only score 1 VP per operative that they kill. So might not be a choice into 5 or 6 man teams. Might be hard for them to max that. But against 8 and higher operative teams, they're going to be looking to dominate for sure. Route, they're going to maybe, if they want to be super aggressive into elites, they'll take route because they can score 2 VP from each elite they kill. They have decent movement they could get within 6 inches of their opponent's drop zone, and they can get that VP immediately. So no need to even survive. If they want to go really aggressive, route's a really good option. They could do it into non-elite teams as well, but they might be more incentivized to take this into elite teams because dominate's probably the better option against non-elite teams. Now, plant banner, if they want to play maybe more cagey, more positional, they can do plant banner. They have ways of getting plant banner for 0 AP through the servo thrall. They can plant it in control range while being in control range of their opponents. They can get by this with the thrall. And then they can probably bunker up next to a banner and be relatively confident they'll survive. As we saw, they can go onto the midline and then just sit on that and get both damage reduction and rerolls up. So could be quite nice synergy there for them. Now, we're going to go into the best strategies when you're playing against Deathwatch, when you're playing into them. They're weak to being hit in their own half in melee or with Melta because they won't have the damage reduction in their own half. If you target the weaknesses of each individual operative like we saw, you can really get at them. That's why we went into super depth on each operative so that you can know what to do against each of them in particular. If you overwhelm them quickly before the counteract window like we saw, you can get at them. If you make them spread out, they can only be in so many places. Tac ops that are good against them might be envoy and flank if you outnumber them, because like we said, they can only be in so many places. You can really stretch the far ends of the map and force them to try to come to you. Once they're there, you just pick an envoy on the other side. Similarly with flank, they will be chasing kills most likely. So you can predict that they're going to try to be taking dominate into you. So you can try to then plan on counter punching them so they can't survive. Now, what not to do against Deathwatch is bunch up hugely and give them double kills if you're Horde, as we saw. They have a lot of potential to get quite a few kills from each operative. Give them easy targets to score dominate. So put guys on the midline. They just come in, kill you, and then run away. Then they're just banking dominate tokens for sure. Don't hit them with multiple operatives at once. This is what not to do. You do want to hit them with multiple operatives at once. If you just go with one operative, you're unlikely to kill them in one shot, most profiles. If you forget about their counteracts, you'd be like, oh, the threat's gone. They'll just like kill 2 more of your operatives if you're not wary, as we saw. If you give them easy kills on the halfway line, they just run away. If you respect their guard too much, like we saw, they'll use it as a zoning tool and they'll cover much more of the map than they should be because they're using guard as a zoning tool. So if you respect guard too much, we've seen ways to break guard. Don't respect it too much. Otherwise, you're going to give them too much zoning capability. We're going to now a few things in action. We're going to use the example from before. This is how to avoid getting killed in a massive way from the Blade Master. Give them one target. So not charging multiple, can only kill that target. Everyone else is on conceal, can't shoot them. They're going to be too far away. They're going to be outside of 2 inches to be charged. Okay, so remember what we said, 3.5 to 4 inches away, you're going to be relatively safe. You're going to really limit this. Now this operative's only killed 1. He can charge only from engage. He's going to be on engage, and then boom, you can just go into him. A little bit of a sitting duck. Now we're going to go a few things. You either go hyper aggressive with really, really good hyper aggressive operatives like Phobos, Void Dancers, Blades of Cain. You can be hyper aggressive and hit them while they're still in their own half. They won't have their damage reduction up. You hit them with a rule like Stealth Assault and you can kill. I've seen in action in a replay of a game, a Phobos player going into one of their combat operatives and just killing them with 2 fight actions. And all of a sudden a 6 operative team is trading 1-for-1 into a 5 operative team. So a really good way you could go hyper aggressive there, get around shielded slaves. Or if you don't have the movement, in certain teams, certain hordes just can't, they don't have the movement to do that. They can't really go hyper aggressive and they're worried about dominate. Then you just go into hyper counterattack. I mean, Hearthkin would be the biggest. Hearthkin Salvage is the biggest example of this. They come in, kill one Hearthkin, then the rest of their team brings the big guns to bear and just with the grudge token just absolutely obliterates them. Even with shield that slays up, they're not going to be able to take too many. And then bye-bye Dominate token. They didn't last until the end of the turn. And now the Horde has gone hyper counterattack and killed them. All right. Hopefully that gives you a super, super in-depth knowledge on Deathwatch. You have everything at your disposal now. You can think of ways to counter them. If you love Deathwatch, they're a super cool team. Hopefully that gave you more of a sense of what to do, how to mitigate your weaknesses, and how to use your strengths better. So hopefully for Deathwatch enjoyers or Deathwatch challengers, you have a little bit of everything. Please let us know if you've learned something new. Maybe we went in depth on a rule, helped you out a lot. Was this helpful in a small way, big way? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And again, just a reminder, you can find everything Kill Team at Top Shelf Co. They will take care of you extremely well. If you need Deathwatch, if you need any teams, everything Kill Team you can find at Top Shelf. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you very soon for the next one. We've got the World Championships coverage coming up, and we can't wait to see you guys again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you in the next one.